and we're going to see what happens. I mean, that's what everybody's waiting to find out. Jalen's not in that category right now, but let's say he has a Pro Bowl type year. Let's say he throws for 40 touchdowns with this group and runs for 1,000 yards.
Well, then he's getting paid.
Yeah, but he might not want to. He might say, you know what, I'm gonna leave my chips on the table and let's wait a year and see what happens. Now he might, his advisors might say, yeah, he also might get hurt. That might not be the way to go. But yeah, I'm sure if he has a good year, the Eagles are going to want to sign him. I don't.
Appreciate your streaming in with us here on Birds 365. McMullen, McDonald, and Paul Domowitch, Hall of Fame voter from here in Philadelphia, writer for the 33rd Team, and us here on JAKIBSports.com. Domo, how's your summer going?
Going well. How about you guys?
Doing well, Domo. Yeah, it's creeping up on us. Do you ever do the math? How long you've been covering this league and how many training camps you've been doing? Because I try to figure it. I should keep a tally, but I always got to think about it. Do you know right off the top of your head how many you've been doing?
Geez. Well, first one probably was, I guess, 83. So whatever that is, it's higher than I can count at my age, John.
Yeah.
That's sneaking up on 40, Damo. That's a lot of camps.
I never like to break out math on people, but that's what pro sports has become, right? Math. So everything's analytics. So yeah, that's for sure. But yeah, you got me beat. So I got to think about 94. So I got to think about it, but too many.
That's for sure.
All right, Damo. Johnny just ran down his previews of the Eagles quarterback, running back, wide receiver. We talked about wide receiver in the first segment. The Eagles add A.J. Brown, and it upgrades their wide receiver core. Domino effect. Smith becomes a 2 rather than a 1. Damn, he's good. Quez Watkins becomes a 3 rather than a 2. Damn, he's good. But then there's the drop-off, and the whole Jalen Reagor, will he step up and earn a spot on the team? Will Eagles give him a spot on the team? What do you think of the Eagles wide receivers coming into this year?
Well, I mean, Watkins I still kind of view as a gimmick guy. I mean, he's not going to have a lot of volume. He's going to be a deep threat when they forget about him, because he's got the vertical speed. I mean, I'm the only guy in America that likes Greg Ward.
No, there's I got him on the team, and Jody loves him. Jody's the captain of the Greg Ward fan club.
There you go. Well, I mean, I still think this guy can play. It's going to be interesting to see. Him and Pascal, I guess, are competing against each other. If you're looking for that,
I don't like his odds if he's competing against Zach, because Nick loves Zach.
Oh yeah, well that's the problem. He clearly doesn't like Ward because of you saw that last year how little Ward played. So, I mean, they're probably only going to keep 5.
Yeah.
So, I mean, with those, if those first 3 stay healthy, you got to like it. I have mixed feelings about the A.J. Brown acquisition only because that's a lot of money to spend on a wide receiver. I mean, wide receiver salaries have just gone through the roof the last 2 years. And the weird part is, I understand why quarterbacks are valued. They're starting to pay wide receivers this crazy money, even though every year 6 of them are drafted in the first round of the draft. So there's clearly no shortage. But I understand Howie's dilemma. He's been guessing wrong too often in the draft on the receivers. So he figured, well, this way we got a guy who's proven if we have to overpay him, we have to overpay him. I mean, there's not a lot. I think I haven't looked at the contract real close, but I mean, the guaranteed money isn't horrible. So, it's not a disaster if in 2 years they decide to part ways or 3 years. So, but anyway,
Howie's generally good with the contract part of it, to the fact you can get out of it, as you mentioned, 2 years without too much. I mean, it's never good if you get it wrong on the player. What interests me though, Damo, is if you go back before They got AJ. Remember, they tried to trade for Calvin Ridley, and that wasn't their fault, and that got derailed for the betting app reasons. And then it was Allen Robinson. Well, it was Christian Kirk, and they got Eagles rightfully bowed out of that. I mean, that was absurd how much he got from Jacksonville. Allen Robinson, Robert Woods. They were trying to get this receiver, and they weren't able to do it. Kind of 0 for 4. And we were going into the draft, and remember they had 3 first-round picks to start before they moved with New Orleans, and we're like, oh, they're going to take a receiver again in the first round. If you remember, Howie at the time said, we don't want to be like everybody else. We don't want to pay these salaries at wide receiver. Essentially, if everybody's zigging, we want to zag. We want to be the smart ones, not overpay for the receivers. Then they go in the draft night. He goes rogue. He doesn't tell anybody. He trades for A.J. Brown. He gives him $100 million extension.
Yeah.
He's a great player, but did the Eagles panic a little bit, do you think?
I think a little bit. They clearly want to get Jalen as many weapons as possible. I mean, adding Brown, he's got no excuses this year. I mean, Jalen Hurts is on the clock. There's no, he's got enough starts right now that you can't say he's not experienced enough. He's in the offense for the second year in a row, in the same offense for the second year in a row. And now he's got a plethora of pass catching options, not only at wide receiver, but Goddard, Miles Sanders, and Kenny Gainwell. I mean, it's just there is no excuse this year for Jalen and an offensive line in front of him that may be the best in the league. So assuming everybody stays healthy, there's no excuse for him not having a 65% completion percentage. There's no excuse for him not being one of the top. I mean, if he doesn't put up eye-popping numbers with this group, there'll be another quarterback drafted next year.
Damo, the biggest move the Eagles made during the offseason was A.J. Brown, and there are a lot of ways that you can determine which is the biggest move, projected impact. Salary is usually a pretty damn good indicator. But Howie had a very good offseason, at least my opinion, John's opinion. We've had you on enough. I think, also speak for you, your opinion as well. Had a really good offseason. And he upgraded the defense significantly. If Brown isn't the number one move, Hassan Reddick is, again, projection and salary being a big indicator. 2 huge additions in the draft. Bringing in an upgraded cornerback. I'm a Steven Nelson guy, but Bradbury's better. Swapping out a couple of linebackers as well, bringing in Kazir White. This has got a chance to be a real nice defense, an upgraded defense, and one that Jonathan Gannon should be able to push whatever buttons he wants to. But then they got to keep it together. They've only got 3 guys who are on the quote-unquote starting rotation who have contracts past this year, the 2 rookies and Darius Slay. Everybody else is on the final year of their contract, both your DTs, your defensive ends with BG and Derek Barnett, which I won't shed a tear when he finally is an ex-Eagle. Both safeties. You get my drift here. They got a lot of guys whose contracts end at the end of 2022. How busy is Howie Roseman going to have to be during the season evaluating, all right, who are we prioritizing here? Who do we want to give contract extensions to?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be something, I think we'll probably see several extensions in November, late October. But there are other guys that aren't getting new deals that they're just going to, I mean, BG wants to be here to finish his career. So they'll get that, if he ends up having a good year and still has one more year left in him, they'll work it out. Fletcher Cox, I mean, he's not going to get another extension. He's not going to get another new contract. The other guys, sure. I mean, they're going to be evaluating them and deciding, who they can go forward with, who can be with this team and be productive for the next 2, 3, 4 years.
You talk about Fletcher. What does that contract tell you, Damo? I mean, the Eagles kind of reset it because they over-leveraged that thing. I don't know how many times they redid it. I think they set a record for redoing this contract. And all of a sudden it got to be too overbearing, and they take the medicine. They took a lot of dead money, but they also gave him $14 million to come back. That's a lot of money. On the Jason Kelce plan. So he's year to year now, so to speak. But that tells me they still think he's a good player. 14 million. Jody's talking about the money tells you things. 14 million tells me the Eagles still think Fletcher Cox is a good player. Is there some Fletcher versus Javon who's ever better will go moving forward? I think a lot of people default to Javon Hargrave. I'm not sure I would just default to that. I think if Fletcher performs better, they might keep Fletcher and move on from Javon. Am I nuts with that?
Well, what's the age difference?
29. Javon's 29, going to be 30. Fletcher's 32.
Yeah, I've watched Fletcher the last couple of years, and he hasn't been the same player since 2018, when he was probably the second best defensive tackle in the league. I don't know why. Sometimes it was injuries, but he's got excellent work ethic, but it just hasn't been the same player. He gets frustrated when they double and triple team him. Aaron Donald does not quit when.
I'm not comparing him to Aaron, but I don't compare anybody to Aaron.
Yeah. But when he was in 2018,
he was.
Sure. So I just don't know that we're ever going to see that Fletcher Cox again. And again, the thing here is the salary cap's going up 25 mil every year for the next several years. So money is no object anymore. Fletcher Cox has a solid year. They'll find a way to keep him. I guess they're just not going to give him they're not going to give him the kinds of extensions he's been getting. So, I mean, we'll see. I just don't think he's going to be that kind of player ever again.
Damo, Fletcher Cox did not make many offseason lists, as in top 10 at their positions. We're wrapping up the season of lists and rankings and the like, because they're actually going to get out there on the field and play some football. Won't that be nice? But a lot of Eagles didn't make top 10 lists, top 5 lists. If you stretch it to 10, a lot of them individually were not that highly ranked across the National Football League. Now, you've been going in the locker rooms for, as we established earlier here on the show, several years. So I've been doing it for a long time. I haven't been able to do it as much since COVID hit, but how serious do the players take this stuff? The media's opinion on where they rank and the like. I know for a fact Madden numbers get them all excited and worked up and ticked off and the like. But any of these other ones, does the old chip on the shoulder thing actually work? Do players go, oh, yeah, I'll show you. You're not going to put me, and go out and actually up their game because they feel they're being disrespected by media?
Well, they do get upset, and they do feel disrespected if they're not as ranked as high as they feel. And usually almost always, in fact, they're always not ranked as high as they feel they should be. Whether it helps them, I don't know. I mean, that's every player tries in football, in any sport, it looks for that motivation, that reason to take it to the next level, to work harder. So it works. Not as much as having talent, but so I think that a lot of these guys will have a chip on their shoulder. They weren't totally ignored in the offseason. I mean, their offensive line is rated one of the top 4 or 5 in the league by most people, including PFF. I was surprised. I think it was PFF that ranked their 2 corners like the 3rd best in the league, 3rd or 4th best duo in the league, in Slay and Bradbury. I wouldn't have gone that high. They're certainly better than they were with the addition of Bradbury, but they've improved their linebacking core. I mean, they've improved a lot of places. Goddard's one of the top tight ends. I think he was in the 2nd tier in PFF rankings. So they weren't Rodney Dangerfield here. I mean, they got their. I'm sure guys like Fletcher felt disrespected, but go on the field and prove it, and then we'll talk.
Well, Slay is a perfect example of this because, as you mentioned, Damo, Pro Football Focus has them, top 5 cornerback group as a whole. Right. And, but Madden ranking, he didn't get a good enough Madden rating, evidently. And I think it was ESPN, I think, did a top 10 list recently, and he wasn't on that. And he got very upset by that. Well, he's on social media, talking about it. So I think it depends on the player and how they get the motivation. Like Slay doesn't seem to get the motivation from people who tell him he's good. He seems to get the motivation from people who tell him he isn't as good as he thinks he is. At the end of the day, does any of that matter? When you have good players, and I'm not talking about as you mentioned, guys like Fletcher who were once at the top. That's the reality of the NFL. Everything's fluid. You have ascending players, descending players. But when you're at the top of your game, it's about the talent, right? Not about the Madden rating. Who cares?
No, it isn't. And, ultimately, these guys have to go out there and play and prove every year where they are. I mean, in this league particularly, it's things change from year to year. So
really quickly too at times, exactly. Really quickly,
both individually and team wise. I mean, we see every year half the teams that make the playoffs don't make it the next year, largely because a lot of the guys we were talking about don't play as well for some teams, and guys come out of nowhere for other teams and excel the following year. So it's that's what makes the NFL, so popular.
All right, Domo, I got a question for you. Who's Tom Radowski? Do you know who he is?
He works for the 33rd team.
Yeah, he does. And that's why I'm asking the question, because I wanted to see if you had a article that you just wrote, and I was going to follow up on it. He did one on the site today. Players entering contract years in for a big payday. Okay, that's interesting. Rob Havenstein, Rams right tackle. Okay, young guy. All right, I figure that. Don't know if he's going to get the biggest payday, but a young guy. All right, fine. Jonathan Jones, Patriots, nickel. All right, that's a little bit of a stretch, but I can at least see. Daniel Jones, Giants quarterback.
A Jody Mack favorite, baby.
And this individual, Tom Radowski, used to work for the Giants. Is he shit me? Really? Does he believe that? He put it down. He typed it out and put it up on a website. Daniel Jones in for a big payday? What? You got to get this. You got to shoot him a text afterwards and go, Jody McDonald just ripped the snot out of you on first 365. Did you really mean Daniel Jones? Or is that a typo? Now it's 2 paragraphs long. I can't think it's a typo if he went on for 2 paragraphs. I'm going to ask you, Daniel Jones, is he in for a big payday this offseason?
I just saw another story, though, on our website. I can't remember who wrote it, that had the best moves for each team. And the best move for the Giants was not giving him signing him.
There you go. It's one person's opinion.
I'll go back and read him again. Yeah. Tom Radowski's not getting me again. I'm not going back to him again.
Everybody's got their opinion, Jody.
Right. And I have mine, and this guy has no bleeding idea what the hell he's talking about if he thinks Daniel Jones is in for a big payday next.
It's unlikely, but it is interesting. The quarterback position, we'll get to Jalen Hurts, obviously, because he might be in for a big payday after this season. And that's sort of the underlying theme of this season. If you look at how the Eagles do business, Damo, Jody and I have talked about this a lot. In theory, they got another year with Jalen Hurts as he's got a 4-year rookie deal. But this doesn't strike me as the team that's going to go into the 2023 season with a lame duck at quarterback. That's just not the way they do business. Some teams don't care. They'll do it. They don't. But the Eagles, they identify players they want early, and you'll see it this year, whether it's, Marcus Epps starts playing well. They're gonna lock him up, as you said, in November or somewhere. TJ starts playing well, they're going to lock him up. That's the way they do business historically. If they don't lock up Jalen Hurts after next season, he's not eligible during this season. Does that essentially tell us that they don't believe in him? Now, they might not be able to get an upgrade because you can't just say, oh, we need a quarterback, we'll go get a quarterback. But if they don't talk about extending him, does that tell us all we need to know?
Well, I mean, let's also consider Jalen's got some say in this. If he has a good year, he's different than most of the young quarterbacks because he was not a first-round pick, which means he doesn't have a fifth-year option. So they have to make a decision. They can't. A lot of these guys, you could just. I mean, right now because of the Deshaun Watson contract, it's kind of a hairy market for quarterbacks with the fully guaranteed deal that he got, with the obscene money he got. Some of these other guys like Justin Herbert and Joey Burrow are be looking for that kind of money, that kind of guarantee. And we're going to see what happens. I mean, that's what everybody's waiting to find out. Jalen's not in that category right now, but let's say he has a Pro Bowl type year. Let's say he throws for 40 touchdowns with this group and runs for 1,000 yards.
Well, then he's getting paid.
Yeah, but he might not want to. He might say, you know what, I'm gonna leave my chips on the table and let's wait a year and see what happens. Now he might, his advisors might say, yeah, he also might get hurt. That might not be the way to go. But yeah, I'm sure if he has a good year, the Eagles are going to want to sign him. I don't think there'll be.
And we'll know, by the way, Tomo, that's my point. We'll know if the Eagles are working on an extension. Maybe Jalen, as you said, wants a bet on himself. There are two ways to go, the players involved as well. But you'll know if the Eagles are working on it. And you'll know if they're not. And my point is, if they're not, that's not a good sign. If they're not able to upgrade the quarterback position.
I mean, this is the move that's going to determine what happens with the Eagles for the next several years, because he plays well and they believe he's the future. They've got all those picks that they don't need to worry about using on a quarterback. If we get to January and Jalen's not the answer because he didn't play all that well this year with all of these receivers in this offensive line, or he gets hurt, getting hurt is really going to throw a damper in this, because then they wouldn't be able to make a decision. We'd be back to kind of like, well, what do we do now? But I mean, if he plays well, life is going to be looking good for these guys.
All right, Domo, I know you were just spitballing there, but between you and I, 40 touchdowns for Jalen Hurts, I'll take the under. 1,000 yards rushing for Jalen Hurts, I'll take the under. But I know you were just throwing numbers out there. But this is a legit concern for me. I brought this up last week. I want your take on it. We know the Eagles would prefer to throw the ball more this year than they did last year. If they didn't, they wouldn't have gone out and gotten A.J. Brown and paid him $25 million per. So we know their overall desire is to throw it more than they did last year. The run game worked for them. The run game got them into the playoffs. But starting fresh this year, they're hoping to throw the football more, and hopefully they throw it very successfully. But if they do, that means less running by their quarterback. And Jalen Hurts, I think it was a Rube stat last week, there were only 3 players in the NFL who had more 10-yard plus runs than Jalen Hurts in the National Football League last year. The Indianapolis kid, Chubb, and one more who I can't remember. But 3 running backs had the 10-plus yard runs. Jalen Hurts had 29 of them. Only 3 guys had more. So if you're subtracting that from the offense, a lot of those runs last year moved the chains. Usually do when you go for 10 yards. That's what they mark first downs off in the National Football League at. But those were key plays for the Eagles. Now he's going to complete passes on a lot of those, and hopefully most of them are more than 10 yards. But if you're lessening that aspect of your offense, is it just guaranteed to be better because you're deciding you're going to throw the ball more? Could having Jalen Hurts run the ball less, either designed and or him taking off because he's feeling the pressure, could that actually be something that the Eagle offense misses this year?
Well, I think Nick wants to run less. I mean, those last 10 games, I believe the run percentage was somewhere in the neighborhood of 65%, the most in the league. I mean, that was crazy. And you don't do that. You just can't succeed long term at that rate. But I think they still want to run, and I think they still want him to run. I mean, you mentioned the 10-plus yard runs. I mean, the numbers that jump out at you about him last year was he was, I want to say, third in the league in rushing first downs. He was second maybe in rushing first downs on third down, which was the one and only reason they were fourth in the league in third down percentage last year. It certainly wasn't because he was throwing the ball well on third down. So now you're hoping that he improves throwing the ball. So, they're in a lot more third and shorts where they can use their running backs where they don't need to rely on him to do that. But I think that's still one of the things he's always going to do well. I mean, we got to a point with Carson Wentz where people didn't want him running anymore, even before he tore the ACL. They just felt it was too dangerous. I don't think they can take that attitude with this kid because no matter how much he progresses as a passer, his running ability still is going to be a vital part of who he is. He's not built like a lot of he's built like a fullback.
Yeah, a little bit.
I think the injury factor, the risk of injury is less. Doesn't mean it can't happen, but I don't think you can take that away from him. I think you need to make him smarter as far as when he takes off and be a little bit more selective. But I think you'll still see, plays called for him to run, especially if the passing game is successful. It's just going to open things up all around. So, it got to the point in Seattle with Russell Wilson where Pete Carroll did not want – I mean, he didn't like what he had. He didn't like Russell Wilson running all over the place. He kind of likes having Drew Locks, believe it or not, that they can just pound the ball.
Yeah.
I don't know that I don't know that Drew Lock's going to take him anywhere, but
he is not.
Yeah. But still, I mean, what I'm saying is they still are going to want him to run. Maybe the numbers aren't going to be quite up there with last year, but that's still going to be a big part of his game.
When we talk about, I think we all agree they want to scale back, as you mentioned, with the run percentage, Damo. Is the scale back sort of less read option stuff and keep the off schedule stuff? Because that's what he does well on third downs. Look, if nothing's there, go pick up the first down. But you can limit it at least a little bit if you put that read option in the pocket and say, all right, we're just not going to run that as much. Is that what you project to happen?
I don't know, John. With this group of receivers, I want to see how big a deal the RPOs are with Nick this year in that offense, because I think it could be really big. I mean, this group running slants could just destroy defenses.
AJ, yeah.
Yeah, and RPOs also mean running being able to run the ball, not necessarily with your quarterback, but with Gainwell and Sanders and the rest of the running backs. So, there are so many. I'm really angry. This training camp, this preseason, this season, a lot of things I really want to see. I want to see how Jonathan Gannon changes the defense with now that he has more versatile weapons to use and can do things that he could not even think about doing last year. And the same thing with the offense. You've got a quarterback that's another year older with receivers that are better. I mean, how are they going to change? Because Nick strikes me as a guy that knows you have to look different from year to year. You can't, last year I remember he was just obsessed during training camp with the fact that nobody was going to know what he was going to do in game one. So, I mean, he's a guy that likes to surprise defenses. So I'm anxious to see what we're going to see from that offense as far as how they attack defenses.
All right. Speaking of game one, which is now, I got it written down here, 62 days away from opening day for the Eagles. How imperative is the Eagles get off to a fast start? we're going to be questioning, at least I will. And John at least laughs when I say it about the Eagles not practicing. They should at least hold hands. I know it's a potential injury, but I think it could bring the unit together. The schedule says this team should get off to a really fast start, which is a good thing in that they do have teams that, at least on paper, they should compete and potentially beat. But if it goes badly, but Damo, if they start 1-2, how ugly could it get here in Philadelphia?
I don't know how ugly it could be, but it's not an ideal situation for them because they do have to get off to a good start. I mean, ideally they could be 8-2 after 10 games.
Oh yeah.
They don't want to be 5-5 after 10 games. That's the worst case scenario there because that's, granted, we don't know, we talked earlier about from year to year, the teams that make the playoffs and don't. So we don't know who's going to be good in late November and December, but assuming we're looking at what we're looking at it on paper now, and that's who's going to be good, then you want to make hay early with this, with this schedule. And then, so at least you have some cushion later on if you have injuries or things like that.
At PDamo on Twitter, follow Paul there. Read him at the 33rd team. Read him coming soon to JAKIB Sports. Damo, can't let you go without talking about the Hall of Fame. 24 days, thanks to Russell Baxter, he's going to be on the show. I wouldn't know. 24 days until the Hall of Fame game. Big year for you with Dick Vermeil and Sam Mills getting in. I want to talk to you, though, about the group as a whole. I found things kind of interesting. Cliff Branch finally gets in. Modern fans won't understand that, but he deserves to be in. Yeah. I was surprised at Leroy Butler. Really good player, really well-rounded player. And it used to be hard for safeties to get in. Now there seems to be a little breakthrough on the safeties. And then Richard Seymour and Bryant Young on the same year. Did that surprise you? Usually it's, defensive tackles, one defensive tackle. You double up on positions, no edge rushers. That kind of surprised me. You see things changing a little bit with the voters and how they look at things?
It was a little bit of an unpredictable year from the standpoint of, you can start with Sam Mills, who the previous 2 years had not made the cut from 15 to 10 in our selection meeting. And, this year he was in, we pounded the fact that he was his last year of eligibility as a modern era candidate, and it hit home with a lot of people, and he ended up going into the Hall of Fame. But you mentioned the defense lineman. Well, it was at the expense of wide receivers. Reggie Wayne, Torrey Holt, they were eliminated early in the 15 to 10 cut. Typically, it's been the other way around. The linemen have suffered, and the wide receivers have moved on. And then there's been a logjam where maybe not, where only one made it. And Baselli's been a finalist for, I want to say, 7 years. I had a lot of problems with him every year because of the shortness of his career.
Yeah.
He was a great offensive tackle. There was no questioning his Hall of Fame talent. I just wasn't sure, like I wasn't with same with Terrell Davis back when he was, whether his career was long enough to merit a Hall of Fame selection. But enough guys this year felt, okay, he was, he's right there on the border as far as games played, starts, blah, blah, blah. And he got in. So, I was a little bit surprised with the mix. Bryant Young, probably. Richard Seymour didn't surprise me. I knew he was going to get in, but Bryant Young was a little bit of a surprise, probably the biggest surprise of that group that's going in this year.
He's been doing it slightly longer than me, a couple more years than that for Johnny Mack, but yet he's got the best 10 of the three of us, despite the fact that he's been doing it longer than any of us, which annoys the snot out of both me and McMullen. Damo, always a pleasure. Thanks, buddy. We'll get you back in a couple of weeks. Do me one favor, though. Send my regards to Tom Radowski. Daniel.
I will.
Daniel Jones.
What the hell is he talking about? Ridiculous. All right, Damo, always a pleasure. Thank you.